Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Before me we see a little minimum RC kit that's stuck on there like that. This is how it arrives in the post, and it's a Savannah EDF, similar to the Red Arrow Hawk, but with one major difference. Up to now, all of the 1S models I've built have been 1S battery. This is a 2S battery, so it's got a lot more power apparently. So yeah, let's have a quick look. Let's just lay out the parts. Just open it all up and lay out the parts for you. Back in a minute. Okay, bang, there it is. It looks like this bag is empty, but it's not. It's got a cockpit glazing, so that's in its own separate box as well, which is quite nice. Means it gets here pristine. The little toolkit and assembly, glue. You've got your super glue and you've got your foam glue, foam safe glue, tweezers, screwdriver and scalpel. Nice touch. This is very interesting, again in its own little box. All the parts for the EDF. I recognise that as being a nose cone. That's your inlet shroud, that's your exit shroud, and some little bits that probably reinforces the fuselage. So that's very nice. Hardware pack. In here we've got, have a quick look, shall we? Have a quick look. A little USB charger. This will be for a 2S battery. The 2S battery itself, 180 milliamp hour, 30C, 7.4 volts. Servo, receiver, brushed, beg your pardon, it's the ESC, 7.4 volt, 12 amp brushed ESC. Your brushed motor, quite a nice plug on the end of these as well. Receiver, this is the DSM X and DS-2, DSM X/2 receiver, fantastic. And then we have the actual components for the aircraft. So it's called the Savannah jet. That's your components for the stand, which is a nice touch, isn't it? What have we got here? We've got top and bottom parts, fuselage sides. Wow, look at that. That's impressive, isn't it? Very colourful indeed. Port wing, starboard wing, fuselage side, tail surfaces, and the decal sheet. It's a single-seater jet, quite nice components in there, and as I did with the Nat, I'm going to put a little profile pilot in there because I don't like to see an empty cockpit. So there we are then, guys. The instructions are going to be online, so we'll go to minimumrc.com and look at the Savannah jet, and we'll scroll down and we'll see a blue link to the build instructions, and then the build instructions will probably be at least 25-30 pages step by step. You need to follow them very carefully, especially the radio gear installation. You have to be careful which way the servos go up, because that linkage goes onto the control arms, which goes to the control horns. So that's a very important key point. Let's get the instructions up and start on stage one. Stage one is going to be assembling the plywood crutch and putting the servos on board, because we need to fit all the radio equipment, test it all, make sure it all works, and then we can start encasing it into the fuselage. Okay guys, here's the next step: installing the servos. Before you install them, you want to connect up all your radio gear and make sure they all work, which they do. So a couple of things to point out. Although the instructions are reasonably, well, very clear on the build, the holes, the pre-drilled holes for the servo screws are tight. It's very easy to split the ply as you push them in if you don't support it underneath with your finger. Something I've just tried doing and works quite well is using the screwdriver as a little drill. Sort of, you can do a little do a little twizzle in the hole. Let's do it on here, like a little shadow, like a little twizzle, just to make the start of the hole a little bit shaped to take the screw. So that worked quite well. When you put the servo in place, because everything's moving about, I just hold it in place with a pin one end. So by putting the pin in, then all it can do is pivot, and you can line this screw up a lot easier. So put the screw in and tighten it down. Don't go crazy, tighten it down, just nip it up. Same with putting on the servo arms. It's very easy to strip the thread in the top of the servo because they're only plastic. So just finger and thumb, lightly screw it down, and just, I wouldn't even say nip it up, but just be very careful you don't strip it. And then I assembled it looking at the instructions, and I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Oh no, I've already put the aileron servo upside down. Well, it was the same way up as these, so you've got to be so careful. So I've just unscrewed it, taken it off, and put it back up the way it's showing on the screen. You have to cut two of the arms off. I just used a scalpel. So now that should match that, as you can see, and the other servos are upside down. Okay, so I've tidied up the cabling and stuck on the ESC and receiver. Don't forget the ESC is only on the 2S version, and cable tied it. I've also put another cable tie here, the yellow one, because I just don't want the battery wire being pulled, putting undue stress on anything. So I've put another cable tie there just for good measure. Moving on to the next step is the main spar and this little rear 3D molding. Very nice it is too, quite delicate, but so the main spar just clips into it like that. This is all showing on the instructions, and then I just put a little bit of super glue either side, and that's in there nicely. Be careful, well, you can't put it on back to front really, because the grooves are in the back for the to fit it onto the, there you go, to fit it onto the ply base. So you can't go wrong really, but it's beautifully engineered, I've got to say. So moving on to the next step. Here are the impeller components. These are the next piece. I push the impeller onto the motor. A little word of warning, be very aware that these wires at the back are delicate, and if you break them off, the motor's scrap, so be very aware of that. How did I push the impeller on? Well, I've used two blocks of wood would do if you haven't got this sort. Just put them either side of the wire, and now the wire is not in any strain at all. Held the motor and push the impeller on as hard as I could, and then remove it, and then just give it a test, make sure it blows freely, which it does. These are the two components. One fits onto here. It's a tight fit, which is what you want. There's a notch here, look. But to get it to go on, I had to clean up around the inside of this, just with my scalpel, just tidying it up. And the same with the outside, any little mouldings, like where the crossbars go, just cleaned it, just filed it off slightly, and it will go on. But I've come across a problem, and the problem is this. When I built the minimum RC Hawk, the motor was a pretty tight fit, which is what you want. This is a loose fit. The fan blade won't turn. You want it as deep as you can inside the tube, the tunnel. The tighter the fit, as it says on the instructions, the tighter the fit the tips of the blades are in the tunnel, the more efficient the motor. The problem I came across was where there's like a join here. It's not a real join, I don't think, but there. And it's just slightly proud on the inside, so you've got to file that away. And to test it, you can blow into it. Just sort of pull it back as it's turning, and you'll see if it's binding. So I've just got to clean a bit of flashing off there. Well, it's not flashing. It's, what is it? You can see in the light there, look. That we'll call it a join, but I don't think it is a join. I've got a little half round file here, so I'm just going to file away on the inside there to make sure that is not sticking out and I can pull the motor back. But the problem I'm having is that because the motor wobbles, I can't glue it in with CA, which is what I used on the Hawk, because the gap's too big. So I'm going to have to use epoxy, and I'll clean off that first so it turns, and then with the epoxy in I'll blow it to make sure it is turning. But there, look, see? You see that wobbling? So I'm going to have to try and center that up somehow. Well, the fan blades will do that, I guess. So first off, I'm going to clean off that bit of, well, I'll call it flashing. It's just rubbing on it, just. And epoxy it in. That's what I'm going to have to do. On the strength of that, I've just cleaned up the casing of the motor with the file, just to make sure it's nice and shiny and will stick, give it its best chance of sticking. By the way, I've just, now it's complete, I've just tested it to make sure that it's working okay. I don't know, because they don't say, but there's a little slot here, look, and you think, oh, that's nice, the battery can go into that slot, but in fact it's a very tight fit, and I don't think you're going to get it in very easily. I might be wrong, but it is a tight fit. But if you look underneath, there is in fact plenty of room to slide it in underneath like that. Not ideal. Obviously it's a battery box, and they've strengthened it a little bit, but if the battery, see, it will go in just down to its designed to go in a little way. Let's try it on its side. This is where it'd be nice if it was a little bit looser, not a little bit tighter, but it's a tight fit that way and a looser fit this way. Well, I say looser, it just goes in. I think they've made that a little bit too tight, so something to be aware of. So anyway, that's the fuselage part made so far. So back to the motor. I'm going to have to make sure this is nice and round, and then I'm going to epoxy it in. So I'm just going to glue this on. So I've popped the wire through the hole that it's designed to come out of, and where are we? There we are. I've got to line up that little lug to there. Place. By the way, this bracket, don't cut it off, it's the fin support post. So it goes on like that. Notice I can press it down if I put it down on the table like that. By the way, this is the illustration for the receiver. On the receiver I found, this is the aerial, this is the chip. So I found that was aileron, elevator, throttle and rudder. You can't see it now, it's covered in wires, but, and I'm just going to run some of their CA Seems to work very well. Make sure it stays. I'm just double checking that it is all the way around and not a funny angle. So I'm just going to hold that there and just put, oops, that's a big blob. It's run all the way around that. Okay, that's fine. That's not going anywhere, is it? That's glued on good and proper. Okay, so it's run all the way around. It's still going. Let's just help it around, I think, with a pin. All right, just connect up the motor wires and power up to test that the motor goes in the correct direction. Oh, well, there we go. And then I'm on to the foam of the fuselage. So let's do that, shall we? Let's just test the motor. The battery, I gave it a bit of a charge using the little charger that comes with the kit. This is the 2S charger, but it's just USB. Just plug it into a USB. Be very careful of these, by the way. They're quite delicate, and I did split it ever so slightly up there, but it'll all glue together. So when I put the sides on, so it's not a problem. But just be aware of that. In fact, let's connect the motor up. Okay, it is back to front. So what we need to do, turn it around. Okay, that's pretty pokey and it's landed on my desk here. I've stuck on the front fuselage sides. When you stick on the fuselage side, just put the nose into the recess in the front, but make sure that there's a little notch here. There's a little notch here, which just sits on top of, and then this just goes flush against the intake. So what I did, I stuck it on there first of all, and then after a minute, I ran some glue down the plywood and glued on the top piece around the top of the 3D printed part, and then when that was dryish, I added glue to the bottom part and held it around just for a moment or two. That was the easy way, and then I glued this bit on the back. When you glue this piece on the back, you can hold it like that to dry. Make sure it's above the line there. If you don't, then the cockpit floor isn't going to fit properly. So it's got to go above a little bit like that. And it kind of shows you that on the instructions as well, but it doesn't point it out. So that's got to go above. And then do the other side. Now I've fitted on the first side. Things to note are it goes over the dihedral brace, slides on, and there's a little notch here at the front. I'll show you on that one. Little notch there out, and that just fits up inside like that. Okay. Nothing seems to fit until you slide the fuselage side. See, it looks over length there by a fair bit, but when you put the fuselage side in, it all tucks in quite nicely. And then it's going to join along the top, butt join, and there's a sticker goes right over the top. The motor, they show you on the plans, stick a little square over the join up here just to pull it together and reinforce it. It's come apart slightly there. And then they don't actually say when to slide the motor in. They just show you it attached to test it. But I'm thinking that it will slide in okay. And there's two little lugs here, one at the front, one at the back, fit in the two grooves front and back there. So I'm hoping I'm going to glue this in and then slide it back into position, and it'll clip in and it'll glue, of course. Before I put the bottom sheet on, I'll just test it one last time just to make sure it is going the right direction. after you glue the two fuselage sides on, you glue in the cockpit floor, which went in quite easily. I put glue around the edge of the thing, and just hold it open, I just use the knife just to pull it apart a little bit, just to get it in there, and then the knife on the top to make sure it was level. There's a couple of little bits of glue here and there, but that'll come off with lighter fluid. Lighter fluid melts this glue. So if you do something and it doesn't glue very well, just get a little bit of lighter fluid, this stuff here, and oven makes are available, I dare say, and just use a cotton bud or something just to put in wherever you want to deglue it, and it'll pull it apart, and you can re-glue it. It's time to fit the motor, guys. As I said, they don't actually tell you in the instructions when to fit it, but I think now's a good time. So I've left that bit loose at the top, and there's the rudder post to accommodate, and then there's 6 little lugs which have to be accommodated. And what I thought I would do is basically put glue around the outside of the casing and glue on the lugs, and then sort of slide it in, pick up the lugs, pick up the glue, and just sort of plug it all into the little holes. I won't worry about the top yet because I can glue that down afterwards, but I think the lugs will have to be glued in, and the rest can just follow suit. But as you can see, it fits around the that lug's not in, but there we go. It fits around the fuselage really well. Let me just put that lug in. Fits around there really nicely, nice and tight. And then when that's dry, I can then glue the top piece together. And I'm not sure yet if I need to glue this to the motor or not. I'll leave it for the minute because I want to see how they... Just making sure all the lugs are in. They seem to be. So I'm just going to hold that there. I suppose I could put a rubber band around. Let's try it. Quickly slide one on. Yeah, that's pulling it in quite nicely. I'm assuming the fin will cover up this join. I've stuck on the rear headrest, put on the top sticker here. I had to cut mine a little bit to get it to fit, but it'd look all right in the air. Stuck on the rear headrest, put on the decal. Before I did that, though, I stuck on the interior cockpit decal, followed by the nose decal, which goes all the way around over the bottom hatch. Before you can fit that one, though, you want to get the bottom hatch just sitting in place so as you can wrap the decal around it and it forms the hinge. And before you actually close the decal off, you drop a magnet, the other half of the magnet in there for the hatch. Make sure you get the magnet the right way around, else it repels. Before I cut and fit the canopy, I'm going to move away from the kit instructions because I want to put a pilot in there. Just a profile pilot, but I think it looks better than an empty cockpit. So with all this detail in here, it'd be a shame not to add a small pilot. So I'm just going to Google a pilot, print it out, cut a slot and stick them in. The canopy itself has to be trimmed down quite a lot depending on looking at the instructions. So I'm going to trim it down and probably glue it on. So how does that look for a pilot? That looks pretty good, doesn't it? When I built the Hawk, several people asked me where did I get the pilots from. Just go onto Google and search for jet pilots until you find something that's suitable. When you print it out, you might have to go into some sort of paint software, but I always do a reverse image and connect it up so I can just fold it down the crease, fold it over, glue it together, fold it over, And for the bigger pilots, I glue a piece of thin ply between as well. But for this, paper's fine. So I print out several sizes and then choose the size that fits. So there we are. There's the pilot. I've had to add a bit of black on the back to because the ejector seat was in midair. Normally it would be against something. How do I fit it? I just cut a slot in the top of the fuselage and slide it in. Make sure when you cut it out you leave tabs on it, else you won't be able to glue it. Just cut a thin slot. There is a crossbar on here, hence the join in the tabs. So I've trimmed the hatch, the cockpit canopy I should say, down a bit. So now I went a little bit too crazy on that end, so I've got to overlap it there like that. And then I'm going to hold it down with little bits of masking tape. Not these bits because they're already used, but I'll just cut some thin strips ready just to hold it in place and then leave it to dry. Don't use CA for this because it'll cloud up inside. You can use the glue they supplied, the foam glue. It will stick it, but I'm going to use cockpit canopy glue because I know what I'm doing with that. Okay, there we go. Lots of tape holding it all in, holding it down. Any glue you see will dry clear. I've used this stuff, Formula 560 canopy glue. It's a lot easier to use than any other glue and it dries. It takes, well, 24 hours really. But I've fitted the cockpit now and I put the trim on up the sides. It's two separate pieces. Don't go all the way up, something worth noting. And then there's a separate piece that goes over the top. Couldn't quite make it stretch, not sure why, probably because easier. So what I'm doing now is gluing up the elevators, tailplane halves and fin from the trim. Don't throw this away yet because it's quite useful. Added a little bit there, nobody will notice. And I'm going to set it up, I think, something like, these blocks are ever so useful. If I put that on there and that on there, then maybe another one, there's a small one, put a small one on the top. And then I can put that one in there. Yeah. Something worth noting as well, there's a little slot. That little slot there is, once you've got it all glued up, you take a piece of carbon and you glue that underneath the tailplane for support. Oops. Just so as you don't get confused, there's two lots of carbon in here. One lot is taped together, that's all your push rods, and the other three are loose. Two long ones and one short one. The two long ones are for reinforcing the wing and the short one is for going under the tailplane. Okay, so that's going to go in there. Like that. It's going to go on there. Push it in nice and tight. You can see there's a small amount of glue on the sides. I'm just going to tidy up. Okay. By using these blocks, I don't know if you've got any, but they keep everything really square. You can use squares and anything you've got just to keep things completely square. I'm going to put that there. And that's already upright because it's already glued to the other half. Right, I'll leave that to set, and I might be able to look at the instructions actually and see what's coming up next. I might be able to prepare the wings or something. So I've glued the carbon rod on the bottom. Something else you might want to consider doing yourself. The control horns, here's one, spare one. Oops, yep. The holes in the control horns are very small, as are the wires that fit in them. But what I like to do, because they are so small, I think they're all fitted on the outside hole, I like to just put a pin in the top one, very fine pin, just give it a little left and right, so when you put the control wire in, you can put it in and turn it without it breaking anything. I've never broken one, just makes life easier. The other thing I like to do is to glue these things in before the instructions tell you to. One of the last things the instructions will tell you to do is to fit the control horns. Well, if you fit them now, if there's any problem with getting them into the slots allocated, you can do it easily out of the aeroplane by putting the piece down on the bench. You can ease it in nicely. I also like to rough up the side a little bit with a bit of sandpaper, a little bit on the edge, the cut edge, just to make sure everything is nice and a good surface to glue onto. The other thing I like to do is to put the control wire in as well. They go in a certain way, but again, it's easier to do it here than when it's on the aeroplane. They won't drop out. So I've done both elevators and the rudder. I've also prepared the wings. That's ready to glue on now, absolutely ready. I've also done the wings, done the scoring, but also glued the horns in and put these are actually adjusters in already. I've just offered the wings up. They go on very easily, very quickly, so they'll be glued on when the tailplane is set. But just by preparing all those and putting them in now, it does make life a little bit easier. So I'm going to glue this on now, let that set, and then we'll come back and put the wings on. I'm handling it carefully because it's not as set as it will be. The other thing I've just done is to just open these holes out slightly because the where's the knife? Because the ends come up and pinch it together. I've just cut them squarer so as the pegs can go in there nicely. So they will now go in there and sit flush all the way along. And I shall glue that on. And you can eye it up against the dihedral brace. In fact, I wonder if it's an idea to put this on after I put the wings on, because then I'll be able to really make sure that it's in the correct plane to compared to the wings, because the wings can only go on one way. Might be an idea actually. The wings can only go on one way. Might be an idea. Let's just pick this one up a minute. So that goes into that cockpit. Does look good, doesn't it? That goes in there like that. Bend it round to the bottom hole like that. Then I'll run a bead of foam glue around inside there. Let's stick a wing on. Oh, by the way, something else you might want to consider doing, because it's difficult to get this open just with your fingers, just make a little tab up out of some scrap sticker just sticking up. It makes it easy to get to then. God, Cliff, you're giving away all these tips. Okay, here we go. Oops. Let's pop the wing on, put that in there, bring that one into there, bring it down to the dihedral brace, and make sure it's pushed all the way in. Hold it onto that brace. Won't take long to flash off. These blocks are really useful. Look at that, another use for them. I'll angle that down a little bit so as it takes the weight of the wing onto the dihedral brace. Right, I've connected up the control rods. Wasn't too difficult. I've got a pair of tweezers like this just to hook them on. all go to the outside holes on the servos. But I did find the only thing worth telling you about was the rudder push rod. The instructions say make it to 115 mil. I've cut it to 115. You can see it's about 5 mil over length. It's up to you if you want to cut it a bit shorter. Otherwise, yeah, the wings and everything's glued on. The next step is to glue the access panel that I took out to connect up these servos, glue that back in and put the bottom sticker on. But before I do that, I wanted to make sure everything worked. And we've got ailerons, we've got elevator, you can't see down the bottom there, I've got rudder, and throttle is okay. So I'm going to stick the bottom panel back on now and put the cover sticker back on, and then there's just these little plastic pieces that go under the, just glue on next to the, I'll roughen them up slightly. They glue on down next to the control horns on the wings just to protect these from grass and what have you, so I'll be putting those on. As for the bit sticking out, I've trimmed it off, but as you can see there's a white line, so I'm going to touch that in. I haven't worried about trimming off this bit down here because it can't be touched. I've also trimmed off the bit at the back because that's where you're going to launch it. So it's very nearly finished. The tailplane looks quite big, doesn't it? Okay then guys, there it is. I've fixed the stand up as well. Put the wing tips on, winglets, and yeah, I think it's made it quite a presentable looking model. Take your time, go through the builds a little bit at a time, read ahead a couple of stages so you know where you're going, and enjoy the build. Now I'm going to link to the maiden flight video when it's done, so watch out for that one. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and in the meanwhile, thanks for watching.